I really love oysters and I like them in a variety of ways, and I like to be surprised by how they're presented to me. We're going to create 3 little surprising dressings for these fresh, beautiful oysters, but this recipe is going to be a little tough for me to let go of. Whilst pregnant, it's not quite worth the risk, so I'm going to have to enjoy your enjoyment of these 3 delicious topping ideas for these fresh oysters. My first topping is sort of a bit of an apple pickle. So I'm just going to slice a really fine dice because you don't want to necessarily be having to work your way through these toppings. So I'm hoping that these toppings will entice even the most shy oyster eater or someone who may not have tried them before. So into our bowl, apple cider vinegar and our apple cider. Oh, I can smell straight away the sweet and the sour notes in there. And then our shallots. You could really use French or Asian, whichever you can get your hand on. But again, they've got that slight pink tone, so it sort of complements this dish quite nicely. So we'll set our apple pickle aside. And then we're going to work on our second topping. I'm going to be using some oyster mushrooms, which are quite complementary to the oysters, but what we're going to do with them is a little bit different. Something that you may be less familiar with is how well mushrooms and bacon go together, but I don't necessarily want to see the bacon or have to chew through the bacon. The smokiness and saltiness of the bacon fat does something quite magical, I think, to mushrooms. So if you haven't tried it, I would highly recommend it. If you had baby oysters, you could use them whole because they're usually only about that size. They also tear really beautifully. If you sort of find that, depending on the size of your oysters, that may be about the same sort of length as an oyster shell. So if you want them to be sort of half that length, we might tear them across ways as well. I just feel like this is just too beautiful a natural sort of shape and texture to want to dice up into perfect squares. Got some beautiful local Tasmanian oysters. I suggest that you get whatever is local to you and as fresh as possible. My bacon is rendering quite nicely. I'm happy to remove the solids from that. So as you can see, quite a bit of fat has been released. And the mushrooms, which are quite absorbent, are just going to act like a sponge and soak up all of that oil. And if you're concerned about nitrites or nitrates in bacon and preserved meats, there are plenty of nitrate-free available, which obviously changes upon heat, and that's where it becomes not so good for us. So if you are that way concerned, just choose a nitrate-free bacon. So we've got our oyster mushrooms. I'm gonna pop them in that oil. Straight away, I can smell them. Now I don't mind if these get a tiny bit of color on them. So you can see this is quite quick. Now you don't have to serve this hot. This also can be one that you can set aside and bring back. So I'm just going to turn off the heat. We are going to be using a dashi or dashi based ponzu sauce. A dashi is made using sort of bonito flakes and shiitake mushrooms and kombu. So it's already so rich in umami flavors. 2 out of 3 toppings done. Our final slightly surprising dressing is a habanero and passion fruit topping. Now the habaneros are quite hot, which is why I choose to use them. If you have a tiny bit of this, you'll know how hot it is because they do vary quite a lot. So you may choose to use a little less or a little more depending on your tolerance level. The passion fruit is so sweet and sour that it's almost its own pickling liquid, so it really softens the texture of the habanero. So a really fine dice. Again, we don't want the texture to be too much or too chunky. I'm gonna mix all of that beautiful contrasting warmth and texture. And passion fruit is one of those incredible ingredients that you can actually use to tenderize seafood like squid and octopus and things like that. So it's kind of a magical ingredient when it comes to working with seafood. And it's as simple as that. So the passion fruit, the acidity in there almost acts as its own kind of pickling liquid. the color of the liquid is changing as well, so it's bleeding out some of the color from the habanero. So I think our guests have arrived, so it's time to dress our oysters. Beautiful presentation already. This can also be refrigerated and you can dress at the last minute. We want to make sure that we get a little bit of the solids from each and some of the juices. So let's dress. Give them a try at home. Experiment with your oysters. It doesn't just have to be natural. There's some really lovely little surprises in here for you and your guests.